In the previous video, we saw two pieces of evidence for theism, the existence of our physical universe and the most general laws of nature. In this video, we'll consider a third piece of evidence for theism, the fine-tuning of our universe for the evolution of human and animal bodies. Welcome, I'm Jordan, and this is The Analytic Christian, the channel that helps you explore Christian philosophy and theology. There is a marvelous order and intricacy to human and animal bodies. They are like very, very complicated machines, equipped to acquire knowledge and perform actions. How are these bodies evidence for theism? The short answer is that theism better explains this phenomenon than naturalism, based on the criteria we discussed in the second video of this series. Let's begin by unpacking the theistic explanation, then turn to the naturalistic explanation. In the previous video, we saw that God has reasons to create embodied creatures with significant freedom. But what kind of bodies would such creatures need in order to make a deeply significant difference to themselves, each other, and the world by their choices? To make such a difference, these embodied creatures would need to acquire true beliefs about the environment, form purposes in light of their desires, and express these purposes through basic actions. And to do all that, their bodies would need the following 5 features. 1. Sense organs with an enormous variety of possible states in response to different inputs from the world around them. For example, eyes. 2. An information processor that turns states of sense organs into brain states that give rise to beliefs of moral or prudential importance, something like the nervous system. 3. A memory bank to file states correlated with past experiences, because we could not consciously reason about anything unless we could recall our past experiences and what others have told us. Our brain does this. 4. Brain states that A. give rise to desires both good and evil, B. are caused by many different purposes that we have, and C. are not fully determined by other physical states, at least if free choices are to determine some of what happens in the brain. 5. A processor to turn these brain states into voluntary movements of the body, for example, to move something with your arm or say something with your mouth. Again, something like the nervous system. It's pretty clear that human bodies have all these features. Only one of these features is controversial: indeterminism with respect to brain states. But if the laws of quantum theory that govern matter on the small scale have no deeper deterministic explanation, as most physicists claim, then it's plausible that there is a small amount of indeterminism in the brain. After all, the brain is an extremely complicated system in which small differences cause large differences. But none of this gives any reason to expect that God would make humans and animals all at once, rather than by a gradual process. As we now know, humans and animals did come into existence through the gradual process of evolution from a primitive soup of matter which formed as Earth cooled down approximately 4 billion years ago. What reason would God have for taking an evolutionary route? If his only aim in creating a universe was to populate it with human beings, there would indeed be no point in producing them by a long evolutionary process. But there are other good features of the universe that God has reason to bring about, namely beauty. There's the beauty of the inanimate universe shown in the development of galaxies, stars, and planets. Similarly, there is the beauty of plants and animals, which gives God reason to bring them about, and the beauty of the evolutionary process itself. Also, animals are good not only in their beauty, but also in their ability to do good actions. I'll say more about this and animal suffering in a later video when we discuss the problem of evil. So the evolution of human and animal bodies is not surprising on theism. To some extent, theism leads us to expect the development of such bodies. Since theism is a simple hypothesis that leads us to expect this phenomenon, theism satisfies the criteria we discussed in the second video of this series, making it a good explanation. Now let's turn to the naturalistic explanation of human and animal bodies through the gradual process of evolution. For any characteristic of a human or animal body that we name, there is an explanation of how it came to have that characteristic in terms of it being one of many characteristics which were slight variants of the characteristics of parents, and it giving an advantage in the struggle for survival over the other characteristics. For example, a little sensitivity to light gave some advantage to many animals in many environments in the struggle for survival. A little more sensitivity gave more advantage, and hence the eye developed in many animals. And above all, complexity of nervous organization in supporting a range of sense organs and bodily movements gave a great advantage, and so we have the complex organization of human and animal bodies that we see today. As far as it goes, this is surely right. But notice, this is a full explanation, not an ultimate explanation. Watch the second video in the series for more details on the difference. But for now, we'll just note that there are crucial matters beyond the scope of this evolutionary mechanism. It works only because there are certain laws of biochemistry. But why are there these laws rather than other laws? No doubt because these laws follow from the fundamental laws of physics. But why those fundamental laws of physics rather than any others? If the laws of physics did not have the consequence that some chemical arrangement would give rise to life, or that there would be random variations in the characteristics of offspring, and so on, there would be no evolution by natural selection. This is a distinct phenomenon from those discussed in the previous video. The issue here is not why there are laws at all, or why there is matter at all, but why the laws and the matter have this peculiar character, a character disposed to produce plants, animals, and humans. It turns out that our universe's fundamental laws and constants are fine-tuned for the evolution of these bodies. A constant is a fixed numerical value in a law of nature. For example, the gravitational constant g in Newton's law of gravity. Recent scientific work has shown that if several of the constants had a value ever so slightly greater or less than their actual value, no animal life, let alone human life, would have evolved. The gravitational constant is just one example. If smaller by only 1 part in 10 to the 50th, the universe would have expanded too rapidly and stars would never have formed. If bigger by only 1 part in 10 to the 50th, the universe would have collapsed back in on itself. How might the naturalists try to explain the fine-tuning of the fundamental laws and constants? Well, if there is an ultimate scientific explanation, it will be a brute fact. So we are left with a phenomenon that theism can explain, and naturalism cannot. You might think that theism is therefore the better explanation, but the naturalist can push back here in at least 2 ways. First, the naturalist can appeal to the anthropic principle. The idea is this: it's not surprising on naturalism that we observe a finely tuned universe like ours, because that's the only kind of universe we can observe. After all, we wouldn't be alive to observe it if it were not finely tuned. Swinburne gives an analogy to show why this objection fails. Suppose a madman kidnaps you and puts you in a room with a card shuffling machine. The machine shuffles 10 packs of cards, then randomly draws a card from each pack simultaneously. The kidnapper tells you he has set the machine to explode and kill you unless an ace of hearts is drawn from all 10 packs. And this explosion will happen so fast you won't even see which cards came up. The process begins, and to your amazement and relief, an ace of hearts is drawn from all 10 packs. You immediately think the machine must have been rigged, but the kidnapper says, not so fast. After all, it's not surprising that you observed the machine drawing only aces of hearts. You could not possibly have seen anything else, because if any other cards had come up, you wouldn't be alive anymore to observe them. But here's what the kidnapper gets wrong. What you observe is not the extraordinary part. That you observe anything at all is the extraordinary part. Why? Because the improbable draw was a necessary condition for your observing anything at all. If chance alone dictated what was drawn, it's very likely you would not have observed anything at all. But if the machine was rigged, it's very likely you would have observed something, namely the 10 aces of hearts. That is what the kidnapper gets wrong, and similarly, that is what the naturalist gets wrong when appealing to the anthropic principle as a response to fine-tuning. Second, the naturalist can appeal to the multiverse. The idea is this: if there are trillions and trillions of universes, each differing in their laws and constants, it's not surprising on naturalism that at least one of these universes will be fine-tuned. Swinburne has a couple of responses here. First, he says it would be irrational to posit innumerable universes just to explain the particular features of our universe, when we can do so just by postulating one additional entity, God. Science requires us to postulate the simplest explanation of the data, and one simple entity is simpler than a trillion complex ones. Of course, the naturalist may appeal to a theory of physics, like inflation, and say that such a theory is probable on the evidence we can observe in our universe, and has the consequence that universes give birth to other universes which differ from each other in their laws and initial conditions. This whole system of universes, this multiverse, would itself be governed by laws that would produce a universe at some time or other with life-evolving laws. This leads to Swinburne's second response. There could have been innumerable different possible multiverses that would never give birth to a universe which was life-evolving. So even if there is good evidence that our universe belongs to a multiverse, we should try to find an explanation of why the actual multiverse is life-evolving, why its most fundamental laws give rise to a universe that leads to the evolution of humans and animals. We have the same reason as before for postulating that God brought this about. God is a simple being, far simpler than the multiverse, and there are reasons to expect that God would bring about the existence of human and animals. So on theism, if there is a multiverse, we would expect it to be the sort that is life-evolving. The naturalists may push back here by appealing to what Swinburne calls a wide multiverse. There are different sizes of multiverses. Some would contain only 2 universes, others an infinity of universes. There are also different kinds of multiverses. There are narrow multiverses and wide multiverses. A narrow multiverse contains only universes with similar kinds of matter to our universe and laws of the same form as ours, but different constants. Inflation theory postulates that we belong to a multiverse of this kind. A wide multiverse contains all those in the narrow multiverse and more. These additional universes would have different kinds of matter and laws of different forms than our universe. The wider the multiverse, the more probable it would be that it would include a universe that is life-evolving. So, if wide multiverses are possible, then a life-evolving universe does not seem so surprising on naturalism. But there are several problems with positing a very wide multiverse. First, the most general or fundamental laws of a very wide multiverse would have to be enormously complicated. Any very general laws by which some parent universe would produce daughter universes governed by very different kinds of specific laws from those which operated in the parent universe would need to be far more complicated than ones which merely produced universes governed by the same law of the same form as the parent, but differing only in the value of the constants. An analogy may help. A machine that produces chocolates and other sweets of different kinds has to be more complicated than one which merely produces bars of chocolate of the same kind, but of different sizes. And that means that a narrow multiverse is simpler than a wide multiverse. We would need a lot of new observational evidence which couldn't be explained by supposing that we belonged only to a narrow multiverse, before we would be justified in postulating a wide multiverse. Second, even if every wide multiverse would be life-evolving, the question would still remain, why is there a wide multiverse rather than a narrow multiverse? Or just one universe rather than no universe at all? Third, if there was a wide multiverse, it would not only contain a universe like ours, but many other universes containing humans. But most of these other universes containing humans would be unlike ours in many respects. They might live in hard shells, unable to hurt or benefit each other. Food might be abundant, and there be no need for cooperation in order to produce food. Humans might have no natural love for each other and no sense of morality, and there might be kinds of suffering far worse than those which exist in our universe. The fact that we don't find ourselves in a universe like that, but instead one where we can live greatly worthwhile lives and understand how things behave trillions of miles away, is to be expected if God brought about our universe, possibly as a member of a narrow multiverse, but far less probable if there was a vast, wide multiverse not caused by God. It seems then that even if there is a multiverse, the fact that the laws governing it are of a type that make it life-evolving is to be much more expected on theism than on naturalism. So the fine-tuning of our universe for the evolution of humans and animal bodies is another piece of evidence for theism. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like. Let me know your thoughts about Swinburne's argument in the comments. Also, check out my animated video critiquing other objections to the fine-tuning argument. The link is in the description of this video. If you value this content and you'd like to see more animated videos in the future, please consider becoming a patron. The link to become a patron is in the description of the video. Thanks for watching.